I got this request, and he's like, what, are you kidding me?
Well, that's fantastic to hear. I wondered about, about James, if he was
Yeah,
still with us, if you guys were still did work
yeah,
together, how everything
yeah,
was between the two of you. So that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
But yeah, my friend had found this comic and he showed it to me, and I was instantly jealous and started looking for them.
Makes me very happy that there are people that, like yourself, particularly somebody like you, who's, in the business and such, that it was a fun comic for you. I mean, I really, that's quite an honor. I mean, I love that you enjoyed it. Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's very remarkable. Sometimes these older comics that we find, they're interesting for an odd reason,
Yeah.
outsider art, whatever the case may be. In the case of Leo Derek, I feel like it's legitimately an impressive comic, and especially like 1984.
Yeah.
There's, it feels like it's one of one. Like I can't think of a context of like, oh, people were doing this kind of book. I thought of Gil Kane's Savage, which would have been
Yeah.
like maybe almost a decade earlier and a little bit
Yep.
different, but
Yeah.
there's not a lot like it.
Yeah, it was interesting at that time. As I mentioned in the email, the only thing we were aware of was the Stanley and Kirby Silver Surfer book. I'm sure you're familiar with. It
Yes.
was like 100 pages, and we just loved reading through that. And we thought we were more, in many ways, even though we were, comic book fans and comic strip fans, which I think is a big influence on what we did as well. Um, that's why I have to say it's really fun to see artists like yourself now using the term cartoonist rather than, because it's like, yeah, damn straight, we're cartoon. It's what we do. It's like reclaiming that wonderful name. But anyway, so we were, of course, Bond fans, and we were fans of all of the action heroes that we love. But we were also really into books, and we read a lot of Travis McGee. We read a lot of the heroes of the time, like my brother Isaiah. And boy, if you want to see comics that could not be published, look at he was doing what we were doing it. The difference was James and I would work together. Isaiah would sit in a room, grab his thing, and he was kicking out 3 when we were trying to think about one. I mean, he just punched these things out, but he never published. And the reason why is because, in a word, they were unpublishable. There was no way you were going to put this on the market, because at that time, I mean, they were highly violent, highly sexual, highly everything. And we just knew there was no way that was hitting the market. So he really did them for his own fun. And I always felt in some ways that he was the one that was really just doing what the hell he wanted. And we were kind of like still thinking about a market. Whereas he was just like, didn't give a shit, just what I want to write, I'll write. And subsequently, I get a lot of joy going back and reading it, because it's like retouching base with someone who really, when we're young, we haven't been polished. We're just kind of throwing stuff out there. And Isaiah's a very intense personality. Right now, he's probably more famous. He has a drum career now. He's a famous drummer. You can put his name in, Isaiah Stewart, and you'll see all these CDs, which I'm on many of them too. And he ended up being a very successful musician, even though his main gig is he's an MRI technician at the hospital in Salt Lake. But he was just prolific. Everything he's ever done, he was prolific. James and I were a lot more trying to get it right, and so we took more time all the time. But anyway, so we love that kind of those characters. And what we really wanted that we couldn't find was someone who had kind of the flair of James Bond, because we always felt when we read Travis and even some of the Saint episodes and things like that, we always felt like it was missing some of the big parts of what made Bond good, complexes and kind of fun stuff like that. And we knew that if you're going to do comics, there were 3 things that were basically a big problem going the route we went. Number 1, didn't have a costume. And we considered that, and we thought, still, we don't want him to. So we just didn't do that. We knew that was going to hurt us. But what we did is instead we thought, how can we make him a very visual face? And that was a big debate. James had me draw probably 15, 20 different takes on this thing. And finally, I looked at Coburn and I thought, James Coburn has a lot of what I want in the face. Ironically, later, Coburn got a chance to see this comic. I never was there, but apparently he got to see it and made a joke about the fact that somehow his face ended up on a lot of things that were kind of, Robert McGinnis would draw him on the cover of a book, and there's, so he was aware of that. But we did a version thereof. It wasn't Coburn. It was just, we liked aspects of what made his face very comic book like. And we went to that because we knew that if you just drew a face, as an artist, they can be pretty generic. And we needed something that had, since we had no costume, was really identifiable. So we gave him everything: red hair, a clef, carved the face, made him even left-handed, even though we never bring it up in the book. All these kinds of things. And we also liked the idea of a red-headed being called Leo. We thought that was cool. Derek is a little bit of a slight tribute to Coburn's character. That confused people at the convention. I'll tell you more about that later, where they were like, is this Derek Flint? We're like, no. This is Derek Flint. Because all they knew is they saw a face that looked kind of like Jimmy. It's funny too, because how long it took us before we kind of settled on a face more like Coburn's. We were doing the Cary Grant, these are different kinds of faces. But we just knew that something wasn't as identifiable as when I carved out that one face and showed it to James. He goes, this could travel, you know? So we really thought a lot about these kinds of things. And we loved Johnny Quest growing up, and they always didn't give a crap. They had complexes. So we thought, we're going to create a Simon Templar / Travis McGee character who's kind of just an angel who appears and whatever, he finds a girl in distress and solves a problem every time. That's going to be that's it. That's all he does. And the point was, we were never, much like The Man with No Name, we were never going to mention where he came from, who he worked for. In fact, we made a point of putting in clues in the dialogue just to say things like that he had no real reason, no real means of employment of any kind. He'd make a joke about being busted the next day or whatever, and somehow he always made it work. And this was really, in a word, our wet dream. We figured, wouldn't it be cool if you could just be this character? You just do what you want to do, and somehow, like a wolf, you just made it all work, So we figured, what the heck, let's make our top character that we would love to be, basically. But anyway, so as we start putting these things together, and we draw some different ones and take a look at it, we finally settle on a few things that we want to do stylistically. One, we want to have a signature opening, kind of like the barrel logo. And so we went with the idea of a silhouette that we would kind of go into, which certainly wasn't a new idea, but for comics, it was kind of fun.
Great image.
Yeah. And then the other thing, and you saw within On Target, we had that was going to be the thing that we were going to do. The next thing we decided was we were not going to use one caption anywhere in this book. We hated them. And when we used to read James M. Cain books, and he never used he said, she said. He threw that out the window. It just went, he had the dialogue go. And I think in all of his books, there's like one he said in the entire series of his books. So we felt that way about captions. It wasn't that we thought they ruined books or anything, but we felt like we wanted this to be the viewer opens this page and nobody speaks to them except the panels and the dialogue. And then we created a secondary little thing, which was the jagged border, which was our way of saying that it was kind of an edit. And it was our way of kind of doing scene merges without captions. And we knew they wouldn't get it right away, but we figured it would kind of suggest the idea that if it was a jagged border that was different than a clean cut. And that was kind of our dissolve, so to speak. And then we went through, and James was writing up different versions of this thing. He wanted to have a lot of Hitchcock aspects. It's funny, at that time, Jim, it was really funny. Everybody I saw that was kind of going into I remember when Somerset Holmes, right after us, I think I started reading some of their stuff. Again, they had that Hitchcock thing. So we weren't alone in the sense that there was a lot of people who loved like a bit of the angle of Hitchcock in there as well. So we put a lot of the tropes in there that we thought were kind of fun that way. And we pulled from Bond and pretty much anything we'd ever seen, and put together an episode that ultimately was really a MacGuffin story. And James was very clear that he didn't want to put too much energy into what LaSalle and Ramos were doing. He says, the way I look at it is the story is the betrayal of Ramos and LaSalle and the girl that got in the way. That's the story. And what they do as a criminal empire, I don't know, nor do I care. So we just knew that we were always going to dive into whatever what fun dialogue we can get. All we cared about was having fun dialogue. That was really the whole point of it all. And we missed that. Are you familiar with the YouTube, since you do so much YouTube? Are you familiar with the Movie Wise channel? This guy comes on and he just critiques films. I think he's somewhere in Europe. He's one of the first people that I would see talk about movies, because I was also a filmmaker. I'll tell you about that a little later too. That really is fun to hear him talk about film, and it's not just this is what they did and all that kind of stuff. And he brought up an interesting point where he talked about, there's a video, in fact, I should send it off to you, where he talks about the character that disappeared from film, which was the clever, witty, smart, and actually gentleman-like character that just went bye-bye and never was seen again. It just disappeared. And so he goes into detail about why they're hard to write, why they're so amazingly effective. And that was what we were raised on, those kinds of movies. And so I remember James just debating over and over how to say a phrase. How do I end the scene? How do I get here? Because he says it's got to hit. And he would throw one out, go to another one. And to him, it was so important that the phrase, one phrase could cover a lot of stuff and give more of a suggestion of attitude and character that you could wander on for, dialogue over and over trying to give things. And he would pick one sentence that covered it. He felt like he needed to move it along, even though we had a lot of time in this book. Felt like he didn't want to have these scenes going too long. But anyway, so we had a lot of fun. I mean, this was a period of time where I have to say I was probably happiest I've ever been in my life making this comic. It was like coming out of high school, just we're thinking, hell, we're going to build Wrecking Row. We're going to build this company, and we're going to have these comics. And Isaiah at some point will maybe produce some stuff we can publish.
You make me want to read his comics really
I know.
badly the way you
the funny
describe
thing
them.
is, Jim, you'd love him. He would never pull him out of his closet, because the thing about him is, because he what's funny is they're really extreme when he was young, but truth being, he thinks he's kind of mellowed. He's the same guy. When I talk to him, he's the same damn dude, even though he's just I think he's just better at PR. But yeah, we were raised in a large family. We had 8 kids. So our family was such, we were knocking around. We were musicians, artists. We did magic. We did all kinds of fun stuff.
A lot of creativity.
A lot of activity. And James, though, he considered being just a writer and novelist and all that kind of stuff. But as he put it, he says, what other medium can you take and have 2 people go in a room and walk out with a Bond film or something like that, where the budget could be literally, you could make it about in a coffee shop, or you could make the world explode at the same cost. And he says there's complete freedom. And I don't have to tell you this, I'm sure you've experienced this yourself. Complete freedom it's the world's greatest thing. And in those days, there were really no graphic novels. We really loved the Warren, really Marvel stuff in the black and white issues in the 70s. We loved reading the Conans, but we were even a bigger fan of the small run of Doc Savage that, I don't know if you've read through those, but holy crap, those are really well done. That was, they were written by Doug Moink. How do you say his name? Yeah, those comics are amazing. In fact, so much so that when this right here got published, and man, I grabbed this like in 3 seconds. And what this is every one of them on good paper, baby. Oh, it's amazing. And these, what was interesting is because Doug did not write the books, he just went and basically did, again, just kind of Bond adventures with Doc Savage. And they're really fun. They're witty. We loved those. And we thought, black and white is not the curse of death. We could go black and white. And it's certainly, we couldn't afford to print color. It was not going to happen. So we probably over a period of a couple of years, really at full working on this thing and doing other things we had to do. And I worked huge. If you ever see these originals, Jim, you will laugh your ass off, because I would hear that people would work like, 11 by 7, the bigger ones. And I thought, I need some space. And so when you bought the bristle board, it was in those in 19 by 24s. I just slammed them on the thing and just drew on it.
Do you still have those?
I have every page.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I'd love to show them to you sometime. It's awesome. In fact, I'd be open with finding a way to get you some. I haven't talked to James about that. And he's a little bit more... he's just more likely to sit on things than I am. I'm like, hey, if someone enjoys this, let's get it in their hands, But they're fun to look at because they're so bloody big. Every one of these pages looks like you could walk into them. And the reason I kind of decided to do that was, first, I really became an artist drawing this damn comic. When I started, we knew that I was good, but I wanted to be much better than I was. And I was studying fast, and working as fast as I could to get better and better. But James said to me, I have an idea. Let's do this. Let's start drawing the damn thing. We got to get going on it. Let's just do it. And let's not do it in order. That way, it will not look like somebody started as an okay artist, and by the end, they're pretty good. It'll look, well, we can hide the fact that you're kind of learning as an artist as you go. He thought the work was spectacular, but I felt better doing it that way. And so, other than the opening, which was pretty much the first stuff we put together, we did that. We went to like the scenes with him and Sonny in the middle, then we'd bounce back. And the last things we did was the escape on the Miss Monroe and the end of the book. Those were the last book we did because we knew we needed to be a kind of a top form on that. Also, by that time, we had realized that the pacing, we wanted to kind of put things in. So we would literally take pages, pull them, and then redo a few pages there to get a better, we felt like we didn't have enough, excitement and fun. So we kind of went back in and kind of repunched up some areas. Anyway, so the experience was fantastic and it was fun. I'd put on records and go draw. It was just fantastic. And for something that I just loved. I mean, I loved everything about this character. We felt like we'd build him from scratch. We'd be careful in public that we didn't say his name out loud because somebody might steal that name. It's that craziness that we all have as creators, right? We're so sure someone's going to steal the character. And so we finally get it done. And my other brother, John, said he might be able to get some investors to help us get it published. And he found a couple of girls he went to school with who said they know nothing about comics, but they're willing to give us a few $1,000s each. And so it was a little over, it was about 4,000 or something like this. Well, actually, it was really interesting. This explains why we have so many copies. Web press, right?
Yep.
And so we say, give us a bid for 5,000 copies, and they give us a bid. And then I said, just for giggles, give us one for 10. Just want to see the difference. Well, the difference was like $600. So you're going to go with the 10.
Yes.
And just put them in your garage and realize that you might never, ever see the end of them. But we figured it was better to have it. And maybe down the road somewhere, if this series actually took off, or the company or whatever, maybe at some point we'd be happy we had 10,000 copies. I don't know. We used to joke about it, like, whether or not that would ever be, and it's like one of those things where you kind of also realize that life is 10,000 copies of them. So we finally get it published. That was very exciting and fun. We come back and we decide to launch it by going to the 1984 San Diego Comic Con, which is, man, if you've been to them now, you know how they've changed since the 80s. In 1984, just to put this in context, James and I book our table and it's like $100 a day. It's like ridiculously cheap, right? And what they do is they just give you literally one of those cafeteria tables. We have no idea where we are in the room. So we come in and get our little badge and we walk in and we're across from Marvel. Marvel's there and we're here. And all the creators of Marvel are lined up. You had Mike Zeck and Romita Jr. and Bob Layton and all these guys sitting around and just drawing all day, But this was what these conventions were like. You would have loved them. They were just boxes of comics. It's basically what they were. There was no Hollywood. I think they would do some Trekkie stuff, but I couldn't believe how different when I heard about conventions later, how they had changed. I mean, they'd really become on steroids. It's amazing today. I'm sure you've been to many of them as a guest. Yeah. So anyway, we go there and basically we're just trying to sell copies and talk to people about this. And every once in a while, the Marvel guys would wander by. I had tried earlier to get work with Marvel, and I'd sent some submissions in. And Jim Shooter, this would have been about 78, something like that. Shooter had looked them over, and it's really wonderful. He sent me back a personal letter, which I thought was really sweet, basically saying that it wasn't quite ready, and he gave some tips. But it was a really encouraging letter, and I've always kind of smiled at that. So when he was at the convention, I didn't say anything, but Jim, has the reputation of being the bad editor-in-chief, and but anything I had any dealings with on that was very small. But he certainly was very nice, and he was fairly nice. He was very nice at the convention. I didn't tell him or even talk to him much. Bob Layton came over and looked at our work and said, "Well, this is really cool." And then and it was really fun to watch Romita Jr. walking around his white suits and his beautiful hair. He just looked fantastic. He was Romita Jr., baby. He was walking around. But the only person that came up and engaged with us, and you will not be surprised by this, was Jaime Hernandez. He came over and he looked at what we were doing. He said, "You guys got balls." And also, being brothers themselves, I don't know if it was Gil. Quite frankly, I can't remember which one of the three it was. But it seems to me that somebody told me it was Jaime who came up. But anyway, he was really, he said, "This is so cool that you're doing, this is big." He says, and he kept saying, "You guys got balls. And we said, well, we hope so, but we don't know at this point. We'll see how that goes. And we had a lot of respect for him because what he had done with $700 and starting his little series that really went well. It's just so different than what we were trying to do. We just wanted to do basically movies every couple of years and drop them every year, basically, if we could keep up with the production every year, drop one of these. But so that's what it was. And we get it published, and we sell 100 copies or so at the convention. And we feel like it's the greatest thing. The first person who says, we'll buy one, because we were charging a ridiculous price. And this was our thought process. At that time, for that book, we probably should have been closer to $4. And we were putting $6.95 on that thing. And we were doing it knowing that it was way high. We kind of knew that. First off, we thought, well, it's a unique product, but also let's see how it sells at that price. And we can always drop, which indeed we did a little bit of that with Bud Plant when we moved a few more. But at the time, people didn't seem to bat an eye. If they wanted it, they seemed to buy it. But that wasn't as much true when you sold it through like ads and stuff. They felt it was, probably a high price. But, and then we went to Comics Journal and we put an ad right in the journal. And we basically treated it like we would a movie ad and said what it was. And we did get orders through that. Not a lot though, not a lot. And all said and done, we probably in the whole run of Derek maybe moved 1,000 copies. But in various ways, just selling them different ways. And I think that's, if I remember right, that seems to be about what we ended up moving. So we ended up with 9,000 in our garage. So, and we probably have almost that still now. And so, but it was very, and then we went to LA and we were doing music and stuff. And so the question was, because we were kind of feeling like, do we want to put time in? I don't have to tell you, they're time-consuming products when you go in, right? And to make one of these things is a lot of hours. And James used to jokingly say, we were right about the fact that you could make a very simple story or a very big story for the same price. But what we didn't realize is that when you're on a film set, someone else is rolling the chords. When you're an artist, you're doing it all, and you're writing it all and doing all that. So it's really time consuming. In fact, a person like yourself that has all the different things you do, I find it fascinating to hear how you manage that, because it's like, to me, that was such a big, when do you stop drawing? It's just, you're just going all the time,
It's something I struggle with a lot.
Yeah,
because I do all this other stuff, and it's kind of I don't want to say it's a distraction.
Sometimes I want to sit down and just hear your story, Jim, because yours has got to be fascinating. But anyway, that was, it was fun too at the convention. You'd have like David Carradine to come up and look at it. I'd be like, wow, that's David Carradine. Because I'd never been in like that LA. I mean, we were spending time in LA because of the band, but being around where celebrities were kind of walking by was kind of new to us. We were kind of like, wow, look at that. Walter Koenig, different people walked by, and we thought, hey, look at that. His son came up and was looking at our comic. Walter, is it Koenig, right? Chekhov. And his son comes up and looks at our thing, and he doesn't, I don't realize that this is the son. And Walter's over there, and I go to James, hey, check it out. And I made the biggest mistake you could ever make. I said, it's Scotty. Oh my God. And his son was so cool. Here's his son looking at my book. That's Chekhov. Just corrects me under his breath. That would be Chekhov. But anyway, it was really funny. So we always kept wondering, should we go back and hit this again and kind of see if we wanted to let this be the kind of the forgotten, the one that was kind of like, if it's out there, it's there, but just kind of keep going. And quite frankly, Jim, I always felt like in a weird way, I knew why I was struggling with keeping it up, because there's so much work involved. But James is an amazing writer. He writes like this. He's an amazing writer. And so with him, I always felt like any work at all, he'd have been doing this anytime he wanted to. Isaiah too. Isaiah is a fantastic novelist. He wrote, because he was loved the old, all that male fiction in that era. He befriended later in his life. He befriended Warren Murphy of the
Destroyer.
Yeah, the Destroyer, right? And so they would go back and forth a lot, talking back and forth, because that was really, I suspect that's really what made his comics pretty intense, is because he was such a fan of that series, and that series was pretty intense. but I still smile looking at it because it's so unapologetic. And in this era, I just love reading something that just doesn't give a shit, you know, not worried about who they're offending. So, yeah, it's interesting. And then I think also I kind of fell off a little bit from comics during the 80s just because I always loved the art form and everything, but I didn't have as much time to kind of stay into it. And some of my artists that I really loved were not as active now. And probably the era that you grew up in was kind of the one where I was kind of stepping out of. And so, you know, everything from that period of time on, and I've kind of almost checked out. I know Isaiah stayed much more in it, and he would always, you know, hand me comics and say, look at this. And I marveled at what happened with some of the artwork in some ways. And then you also kind of a little bit look and go, oh, but I kind of like the old newsprinty. My era, you know, you don't want to just be one of those people that only love what you grew up. You don't want to be that person. But I really loved the big presentation of the Silver Age from the 60s to the late 70s, where panels were big and they said something. And even when Pollard, I remember when he took over for Amazing Spider-Man after Ross Andru decided to retire on that, or whatever happened there. You never know. I remember when he went back to the 9-panel pages and full figures, and I said, we're past the kind of the Ditko layout. We need to keep it big, you know? And so that bothered me. And at that point, I was going over and reading, you know, Frank Miller or somebody else where they were kind of keeping it more cinematic. And then many years later, James and I collaborated again on film, on stuff. And so we did She Lives by Night, which was a vampire with amnesia, independent film. This is us at the convention. Now that is what it was. Just
That's fantastic.
A table with the two of us sitting there. And you'll recognize us on page 11 of the comic. We're on the plane.
That's amazing. What was the reception like? Did you get reviews in Comics Journal or?
We had from the reception. I don't think we really knew what the reception was. We would sell copies and they'd go away and we'd hope they liked it. And we had people who read it and go, this is fun, you know, but we weren't connected enough with like creators yourself and different people where we could hand it to them and go. And I think that we had a lost opportunity there sitting across from Marvel, that we, being who we were at the time, we were like, well, we're doing our thing and they're doing ours and we don't want to bug them. But also maybe we don't, you know, maybe we don't even, I think we had a little bit of an ego too, where we were kind of like, no, you know, we don't need them. When we did our comic, one of the things we ran into was we did what we thought was just like a Flint or Bond poster basically for the cover, and we immediately ran into a problem where the comic vendors would look at it and say, well, do I put this in the adult section? And we're like, what? Well, no, this is not adult. And it was like, they're bikinis, for God's sakes. This is not Cherry Bomb. This is just I love the Cherry Bomb. This is not that. And so it was like we had to constantly deal with this. And plus also at the convention, we noticed an interesting thing, which was, I mean, you can't blame them. People would almost see the cover and walk away because they didn't know how to respond. Because these are, it's like, is this some kind of pornography? There's girls in bikinis. Oh my God. So we thought, oh, that's interesting. Maybe the next time we'll do more of a pulpish kind of cover stuff instead of like an outlandish Bond type look. So isn't it interesting to have to guess the way that people are going to respond to things? You'll get 8 things right, and the 2 you didn't think about are the 2 that people will be constantly belaboring. Like, oh, what about this?
I had another question about distro. You mentioned, I think, Bud Plant.
Yeah.
Was there anybody else?
Bud Plant came back. What happened was we, and I might have the story wrong. I might have to ask James to clarify it, but this is how I remember it. But I might have had it backwards. So Bud Plant had wanted to come in and get an order, but they wanted the price point to be lower. They wanted to basically pay $250 a copy, which is fine as a thing. And then they were going to sell it for like $450. And our first response was one of, well, it's too early for us to make that decision yet. But later, what happened was, I think if I remember correctly, we did end up selling them a certain amount. They asked for a certain amount, and we gave that to them, and then just sold it off. And they did sell it for a lower price point. It was like $450 or something like that, or $4 or something like that, which is probably the price we should have been asking for. But at the time, we kind of thought, we didn't know. There was something about us that we thought, no, let's go bigger. Let's go a higher price. And we also thought it would help with it. You know, it didn't. We had to pay off the debt. The $4,000. We basically found a way. My brothers all worked together to get that paid off. But it's in, but again, it's so interesting to look back at that. There is something so, what I love about being an artist and a creator in that way is if you're just a writer, there's no physical final product. So even though it's great, but you're living in your mind and then you punch out basically the mind. That's it. But as an artist, you have kind of the best of both worlds. You do have the mind going and you're building the thing, but there's a tangible object that comes out as the product that can be looked at and handled. And also there's a feeling of a physicality, which in this day of screens and all that junk, anything physical is so good. I mean, it's good psychologically, but to kick out a product and look at it it's a very physical manifestation of the work you've done mentally, in a way that I always felt writers didn't get that result until it went to, a screenplay or something like that. So I always loved that. And so sitting there and just creating all day, listening to music that I loved and drawing and hoping somebody would love what I was creating, but at the same time, kind of doing it because you love it. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. It is very satisfying to finish a page and then you can see it. It's like,
absolutely.
It's to your point of being tangible. The other question that I have for you is, how did you figure out literally how to draw the comic? Like using even the brushes were the way to make these lush lines, or
so that's its own question. Now I've gifted, I don't know what it was when I was a kid, but I was fairly good at picking things up and being fairly talented, just kind of for some weird reason out of the gate. By the time I was a kid, I was already a jazz pianist. I would always like drawing, but if you look at the arc of my drawing from the time I was 12 to the time I was 16 or 17, it's an arc that's a pretty extreme arc. And it also kind of goes like this. And the reason why is because I knew I was amping up to do a project. And so what I started doing, but you're going to laugh, the number one way I learned to draw, which was look at the page. I just studied the art, and I would study. And I would stand in the room and say, I'd hold up hands and say, that's a George Tuska, whoever the hand was. And we knew what they looked like. And we would laugh about the fact that we could call the artist based on the hand, And isn't it fun how you can know the signature? The point you look at the page and go, bam, that's Sal Buscema, baby. I know that. So that is looking at that and realizing what I needed to know and kind of what I didn't need to learn. There was a certain amount of... But I knew when I got to the point where I was drawing things that I thought they looked good, and I knew when I was drawing things that I thought looked kind of good, and were still a little, they weren't at the point of rendering that I liked. I wanted it to be sharp, and my biggest fans were Leonard Starr and Ramita and these people that could just wield a brush. So I knew I was going to use a brush, and I knew I was going to have to get good at that, and I started in fact, I think knowing that I was working so big, I went really bold on my, I'd use a reduction glass to look at it, see kind of what it looked like reduced. It's basically a camera I'd look through. And then, and if it looked good, I'd leave it. But I also erred on the side of a bigger brush stroke because I liked knowing that it wasn't going to be lost in the camera, taking a picture of it. And as I kept working and I would hit a page, I would think to myself, you self-correct. You look at this and go, this is a good page, but it looks like it could be cleaner inking. So the next page, I would just bolt down and do it. And it really was trial and error, just going through it. And when James came to me and took some of the pages that we had done in the early days and said, I'm going to pull this scene and we're going to redo this scene, I went, because I thought, I don't mind those pages not being in there. But yeah, it really was, I just kept working at the process of making it look good. And again, I had really high ideals because of the people that I loved. I mean, if you're looking at people that can render like Buscema and Ramita and these guys, it's a level where you really got to work hard. And so that was really it. It was the pull, and from looking at what it should look like, that really made me get there. But as far as my ability, I had a pretty good eye, and I could. My biggest problem, and I'm sure you experienced this as an artist too, was learning how to do it in an effective. I could sit and belabor a panel and probably get it to go well, but first off, the construction of a whole page in a way that really had good flow and good. That was really more my movie making background that really made me understand that. Plus, Gene Colan and people like that really lay down a panel in a way that you look at it and go, wow, if I could do that, that is spectacular. He was a big influence on my work because of the fact that he he was not any of the other guys. Later, when I heard the story, I read one of his interviews, and he said, but every other person that went to work for Marvel, at some point, Stan Lee gave him Jack Kirby pages and said, draw over the top of this, because I need you to understand the mighty Marvel way. Gene Colan makes the interesting story that when he came to work for Marvel, Stan Lee did not do that with him. Stan Lee just put him to work, which meant there was something he didn't think he needed that the others did. This included Buscema, who balked at the idea of having to draw over the top of Kirby's work, right? But when you look at his work, it's the craziest work. It's sometimes so crazy that you're like, dude, a foot doesn't have to be this big, right? But at the other time, man, I look at some of these Daredevil fights he would do, and when you look at the panel, before you started to read it, I mean the page rather, you already saw the action laid out in a way where you felt it hit in a way that some of the best artists can do, right? And that's a unique skill, that one, because there's great renderers and great artists that somehow, though, when you look at the page, you don't feel the dynamic of the whole thing happen. And so when I would look at his work, I thought, oh man, I loved how, and the people that inked him who were good, I think really helped his work too. Yeah, a big fan of his.
I'm glad to hear that one. I also love Gene Colan, and yeah. I often think I love Kirby too. You know,
yeah,
Kirby,
me too. Oh,
his dynamic.
Kirby. Well, he's like he literally invented.
But Gene Colan has like all the same tools. They're just his. They're different style, but you know, like he foreshortens. He'll bend like cars that are like jumping over.
Yeah.
You know, and things that shouldn't make sense. But he does all that stuff. It's super dynamic. It's just his. It's not like you say. Totally it's not like Kirby.
One of the most unique styles.
It's amazing to look at.
Absolutely. They all found their own look in the way where you know they are. But
sure.
I would say that Colan, in some ways, when I look at him, I don't see any. It doesn't look like he's referencing anybody, and except for the fact that it's bold, which is very Marvel-like at the time. It's very bold, and he jokes about the time that Stanley gives him shit about the fact that he took one whole panel, half a page, to draw a hand on a doorknob. I don't know if that exists, but that's what they claim. And he'd say, sometimes, you know, you don't have to go quite as big, Gene. You can kind of get it done. But what I marveled at when I was looking at some of the ones he did for Captain America and Daredevil, and some of the work that he did, it just struck me that, and this was true also for, of course, Robita and Buscema, but in some ways Buscema even more on the layout. Buscema really got layout in a way as Johnny at his best. What can you say? He's like, you know, he's his own level. What can you say? But there's something about the way that look at the Avengers era where Buscema was drawn for that. Oh my God. It just looking at the flow of the page is like looking at it's literally a work of art. It is a work of art.
Yeah.
But and the work he did on Conan and all this stuff, he could just knock it out, and it just was beautiful. Yeah, I think ultimately he definitely lives up to his moniker. But yeah, those looking at all that and just the rendering of this is like let's see, here's a Saruri. Alfred Andreola to me growing up, but Saruri, you know, I think it was Saruri Gauman who did Carrie Drake, who really ghosted. And you look at the work on this, and this is an original that I bought, and you look at the work on this, what he piles into those little panels there, and you go, man, it's just so clean and so wonderful the way he used the brush. That was always my battle. I don't know how you felt about working with brush, but I get to the point where I did most of this. It was just like a number 3, just ran the whole thing. But I'd get down to, I did use pen at times, but most of the time I would brush the whole thing. And you get down to those small lines and you think to yourself, now, will that reduce into nothing? Yeah, I'll let it go. It will reduce to nothing. So let it go, yeah.
How difficult was it to actually like figure out printing and everything? Was that a challenge, or did you have somebody?
Well, I read books. There were some really great books published. I was in and out of the library a lot. There was a lot of books published. Speaking of Gil Kane wasn't his book, but he was a lot in it. There was a book published in the mid-70s that was all about people that were producing work for fanzines and things like that. And they were, and in it, they went through the process of teaching you how the 4-color process worked. And I always knew that was going to be, I thought, oh, that'd be so cool if I could get to do all that. But then I realized in those days, the Ben Day was cut by hand, and I certainly wasn't going to be doing that. But what struck me was the general plates and camera work. Isaiah was in high school at the time, and he was in a printing class at the class. And we actually went in and ran some of our originals and did some mock printing with, what was an offset press there. So we could kind of see how that worked. And I said to Isaiah, we are the Freak Brothers. We just stop here and just keep going. Be the Freak Brothers. No reason to go. But we knew for the cost, the web press was going to be the way to go. And so we knew that other than where I really feel like I was just making it up as I go was the cover, because the artwork I knew I asked them, does it matter the size? They said no. So I figured that we knew we could put the camera, they'd shoot it and we'd get to the size we wanted. We told them it was going to be, Conan size and all that, magazine size, which they say is not, they informed us that's not a coincidental size. It has to do with how WordPress is designed. That page is that size it is. So that's a good size to pick. But the actual printing of the cover, if I do it over again, of course, very quickly after that, I realized I had what I did was this. I simply took a copy of my cover, which really hurt because it was a reduced size. I took a piece of Mylar plastic, put it over the top, and then got acrylic paints and just painted it on the back. And then I got to the point where I went to the printer set and I said, I could give you one that's the color separate from the black and white. And they said, really, in this case, it wouldn't matter. So they were just going to shoot it and do separations that were not
full color process.
It's 4-color, and it was done with where it's, instead of it being a mechanical where you do it by hand.
That's what I mean. They were separating the colors from the full color piece, just
like it was a painting. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we went with that. And I was trying to be very careful. There was certain pencil lines I had to put on there and stuff, but some of those showed up, and that really bothered me. Plus, the lineup also of everything. As you can see when I sent you the other cover, that's kind of the one I did later, where I just kind of went back in and cleaned it up in Photoshop. Like, this is what it would have looked like. But the little things like just even the Wrecking Row logo and things like that, and always feeling like it never quite. And when we went in to get the proofs, the first ones that came off the press, we felt were just god awful, really gaudy looking. So we had to just keep cutting the color down and down and down. And finally we said, just cut it way down. Wow. And when they finally got it way down, it looked more blended like we wanted. And so we went with that one. But by that time, we'd had them really drop the color down because we felt like it was just every little mistake in the acrylic ink I used was showing up like just a gray carve. So I really did not that great a job, I think, on that. However, the result, as James said also, he says, well, you can argue, though, that it has kind of it has like an old movie poster, which is kind of what we would have gone for anyway. So he says, that looks kind of like what we want.
And it's so interesting to hear that take on it, because like I look at it and I think it looks great. I love the Wrecking Row logo.
Yeah.
I think it looks amazing. The design and layout of the cover, all of it to me is great. I mean, look, I fell in love with this cover first.
Yeah.
But I also compare it to other stuff that I'm looking at. And then I think, what else was coming out in '84? Yep. And it feels so different than what I think of as like comics of the early '80s.
Yeah.
Even though there's some stuff that there is overlap, like the inking style especially is one of those, now people, I don't even know how much people use brushes at this point today.
Oh, I know. I would imagine.
So like there's some stuff that's similar, but also there's stuff that it looks very classy, whether it's movie posters or old pulp covers. Yep. It's sampling from a lot of things that aren't just comics.
Oh boy.
So much of comics is just comics. I learned to draw from comics. I learned everything I know.
Nailed it. We were pulling from a lot of references, even to the point where the stupid little dots that go across the top, that's straight from a Matt Helm poster that we liked. We just simply pulled it. We're like, that looks cool. We'll do that. We didn't know. And the Wrecking Row name of the company was simply a takeoff. I'm sure you've already picked up on this, of the Wrecking Crew and Murderers Row, and we just flipped the thing so it was Wrecking Row. That was the whole point. So it's just a giggle, our little Matt Helm reference.
Where were you guys living at the time? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Utah. Now, we weren't Mormon, but what's funny is we had a big family, and so from that perspective, we had a lot of the cosmos of what would be like almost a Mormon raising. But we weren't Mormon. But you bouncing around in that city, you have an interesting it's kind of like almost being in a city where everybody would be Catholic or something. You have this thing where you have everybody's one way and you're not, and then and they're fine people, but at the same time, you're different, and so you're already kind of carving out your own kind of place. And so there was we learned a bit of a rebellion towards kind of almost everything. My dad kind of taught us that too. He was a farm boy, and his attitude towards a lot of stuff was, you don't trust anything, and he would take us to R-rated movies when we were 10. He didn't care. It was like, get you in. And I remember watching Serpico, and I was probably 11, maybe 12 years old. And I remember thinking, I got to see more movies like, I got to see some more movies like this. What was the movie about, Josh? I don't know, but that tub scene, I'll tell you. But it was interesting. And so we fell in love with Bond. The first time we walked into that theater and saw that, we went, oh my God, that, my whole life changed the minute I saw that stuff. But we also knew that what we thought was more fun in some ways than even, we knew our character wasn't going to work for anybody. That was going to be the big distinction. And so, the independence of the character is very representative of the independence of the people. And kind of, I think it's a combination of being in an environment where there was just so much going on, because it's a small house with a lot of kids and a lot of things going on. And I learned more about music by the time I was 11 or 12 years old, simply by all the music that was pumped into that house. My dad was a jazz fan. My mom was a classical singer who also loved jazz. My older siblings were all into the 60s rock. By the time I hit 11 or 12 years old, I had a history from, the 20s to the freaking 70s. And that carves in kind of a new perspective if you do that. I think today, a lot of things you run into is the reverse problem with that, which is, and I don't know if this has shown up in the comic world, but I know it's shown up in the music world with the performers. And that is, when I was growing up and you got into certain forms of music, you'd get an album and you'd play that over and over and over and over. So you almost got a certain style from that thing, and then you go to the next one. But you didn't have access to everybody. That wasn't everybody available. And you had to kind of build your chops as a musician based on who you saw, what you could play, what you loved, all these kinds of things. Now you flash forward to YouTube in today's world, and the musicianship on there is extraordinary. You can see people play stuff that you think to yourself. And in the world of card mechanics or card flourish and stuff like that, the stuff they're doing today on YouTube, we didn't even conceive of in my era. Didn't even think it was a possibility. Literally, we would have thought somebody walked on water if they did it. So something like with card work, it's been nothing but a straight line. But when it comes to things like music, I noticed something that I think you'll find interesting. I noticed that when I was listening to all these extremely good musicians, and I mean, that's being kind, how good they are, I didn't hear a distinction between any of them. I couldn't tell you who was playing what. Every one of them, had they played it for me, and I knew enough about them now to kind of know what their different sounds were, I couldn't have told you who was who. But think of this. Imagine if somebody goes back and says to you, they play you a track by Thelonious Monk, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, pick the artist. You don't hear 4 notes before you know who you're hearing. And it occurred to me that much like evolution, where you have everything just kind of going crazy, that in the past we had a little bit more of New Zealand going on, where things got off in corners and kind of evolved separately. So you had a forced form of distinction. That today, everything is so available that the same level of expertise gets the same result, which is kind of sad, because on one level, it's spectacular, but on another level, there is really no way to tell the difference between any of these players. And whereas, man, it's just like you think about, you almost have to have them not have access to some things to get them to kind of
fascinating.
Yeah, it's almost like to get that evolution to kind of happen in a unique way and not to have everything the same. You kind of need to get some isolation in some ways to get people to kind of create a new idea. And right now, there's it's kind of fun to watch. In a weird way, mass just evolution of everything. It's kind of fun to watch, but at the same time, it kind of just goes like this. And you don't, it happens all kind of at once, and it all is kind of the same. I don't know if you felt this, but even in the world of narrative and stuff like that, one thing that's cool though is that people have options of going wherever the hell they want and finding what they like. So that's the coolest thing. Yeah, that's where I think creators like yourself are so lucky, because you've got people that if they love your work, they find you, and boom, that's so cool.
It's really interesting. There are parallels between what you're describing with music and comics. I often talk about, I think more people are making comics now than ever, and at a higher level. They have access to all these tools. So I will often come back from a show and be like, if I would have found this book in 1999, it would have been the best comic I've ever seen. And this week I've got 20 that are at this level that I saw, you know,
Right.
and it's very similar in that sometimes it's a huge technical skill set that these people have. Because like I would say when I was a kid, I'd hear Jack Kirby or Robert Crumb or whoever, and I lived in the middle of nowhere. It would take me years to like find some of these guys.
Exactly.
Whereas now in a summer, you could go through like all of Robert Crumb's work, all of Jack Kirby's work. You have access to it in a way where like I'll see comics from a 19-year-old be maybe their first comic and it'll be phenomenal. In a weird way, Leo Derrick might be the first of these because that shouldn't be a first comic. It shouldn't be a 20-year-old's comic.
You're very kind.
All of this stuff.
Yeah, I have the same experience. Yeah, it is interesting. And from that level, isn't it interesting how skill and kind of identity can be two kind of separate ideas? And I think that you sometimes can look at something and some of the rough edges or whatever, you'll look at it and you kind of go, but I wouldn't change it, kind of thing, right? And this is true. This is why we like, you know, black and white movies or whatever. That there was something that had a particular way it looked that they've moved on from. But, you know, the other day I heard that they were auto-tuning John Lennon's recordings from the 70s. And I went, well, it's like the assumption that improves them is a real big assumption. Because if you know anything about, you know, singers, they push and pull notes all the time if they're great singers. That's the whole point of it. To decide that, and I always equated, I would always tell my students, I'd say, it's like saying that a painting has more right angles, therefore it's better. It's got a whole lot of right angles, so it must be the best. It doesn't even track. So yeah, it's interesting. Your experience bouncing around and working with different creators and doing your own stuff and all that kind of stuff. I think you must have a really interesting life where you've had to go through a lot of this in different ways that you've gone through. I mean, that's got to be fascinating, all these different things you've experienced.
I love comics. I still, you know, you said in the beginning when we first started talking about just how rich this field is and that you can do anything with it. And I have felt that from very early on, probably when I was 12 or 13, whenever I really started getting into comics. And so I'll obsess over something for a while, and then it'll be like, let me look over here at manga, or let me look at European stuff, or 80s black and white comics, you know, whatever it is. I just haven't run out of space. You know, I often describe it as like, if it's a landscape, you know, I'm just going to go over and explore these comics.
Right.
And, you know, what you're saying about identity, like I would say, you know, it's voice or maybe it's style, but those are the parts that I want. And it's almost like the wrong part, you know, it's almost like the pieces that aren't quite right are the parts that really define an artist. But also I want those edges. I want that rough part. I want the part that's very human and very much this person or that person. And, you know, as people become more polished or technically accomplished, it becomes less interesting to me personally.
And also there's a certain flair to somebody who really knows how to wield an axe. When you look at Kirby's work, and that lovely flat thumb that sits on the top of all these things, or the way that he would block a sequence or whatever. One of the reasons that makes artists like himself so cool is that the style is so distinctive. I mean, you literally, that's the one artist that you never have to ask. With honorable mention going to what's Stan Lee's brother, Larry Leiber, who basically tried to draw like Kirby. Larry always loved his work, but I always kind of smiled at the fact that he basically was kind of a soft Kirby. I don't think he ever really developed a style. Did you? I never felt like he got a style.
It's true.
Yeah, but yeah, Jack is such an original. And also there was a really funny phenomenon we used to joke about where we would say, I wonder if artists look in the mirror a lot, because we'd say, when we saw a picture of Kirby, we went, holy crap, it looks like he drew himself. And the same thing with Ross Andrew when I saw him, and some of these characters, even Ramita's soft, beautiful, carved little, it's like you think, oh my God, they're the handsome little Italian guy draws handsome Italian. It's kind of funny how we, in a weird way, I think we kind of recreate the world that we're our own image in a weird way.
100%. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. It's so much fun. It's so much fun talking to Jim. It's like a brother. I've just got a new brother. It's so cool.
Well, hopefully this is not the last time. I look forward to conversations with you moving forward too, because this has been amazing. And thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, yeah. And as I said, just anytime. We can Zoom anytime and talk and do whatever, and keep me in touch with whatever you got coming. The idea, it's really funny. Later, when I was thinking about could I restart Derek and redo him, and I thought, how would I do it? Would I do it as like he's that Jet Age character, you know? Because I knew I couldn't bring him into the modern era because I didn't want to deal with cell phones. I didn't want to deal with freaking the internet. I wanted him to be with jets, freaking phones, and you know, I didn't want him in there. And then you're really making a point of it. Then it's like, oh, this is a mid-century, 20th century character. So I was kind of torn on that, but I thought, could it swing? Plus, there was all this attitude towards, you know, political correctness that I thought there might be a market for creating a character, putting a character back in the fold here, where he's unapologetically not politically correct. That might be right there. That might be the whole thing right there. So I debated that and thought about it. You know, the whole idea of, you know, one of the catchphrases I was throwing at James was, what was the joke? I said, he doesn't work for the government. He doesn't work for forget what else. And I says, something about, I can't remember how it ended up, but it was something like not having a job at all. Is what basically I do. But anyway, but every time I would do it, I would think to myself, how would I make this kind of work in today's world? Because I realized it was a bit of an anachronism for how I saw the character. I didn't have to do that in the 80s. The 80s, it was just still fine. It had regular phones and all that good stuff. But today you got all these things I didn't really want to introduce into the character. And I certainly didn't want to get in any kind of, I think that the, I don't know, what's been your experience, Jim, when you were writing characters, particularly when you were writing for other people or drawing? You write as well. Did you write as well, right?
Yeah. I write, and I have worked with other people. I've worked with writers, and I've I don't know if I've written anything that someone else has drawn yet, but
oh yeah, interesting. Yeah, but you write and draw your own.
Yeah.
So yeah, but there's always that part of nowadays. You know, there's always this thing where you have to think about, okay, and then I've got to go into the world, and then you can have all these responses in a way that you didn't have before. People didn't pay any attention. They didn't give a crap what anyone was doing. So that always plagues into it too. I'm always kind of like, oh yeah, how would I approach that now? You know, I don't know. It's interesting.
It's a big question, you know, like I don't know an answer to that.
Where you put the scope on it. On one level, you know, Tarantino, for example, I love half of his work and the other half I'm disinterested in. But one thing I never ever I always love about Tarantino was that his basic attitude was that I'm going to do my thing, and there's somebody out there like me that might like what I'm doing. And that was how he started, and that's kind of what he's continued to do. And so from that perspective, the unapologetic way that he goes about making films, I've always really marveled at. And again, I think that, in my opinion, his balance is it's always funny. I'll see movies of his that I like, and then there'll be parts that go so far, I'm always kind of like, but you could pull that down to here and make it down. It's like, I always wish you could kind of, if I could rebalance the film a little bit. But again, that's just my critical whatever getting in the way of his freedom. But yeah, but I love the fact that anyone that creates anything where they just kind of do what they do, and you know, their response to anyone saying this or that's bad, they're like, well, whatever, you know, teach their own, and off you go. Because yeah,
my favorite part about comics, you know, like I all these comics, especially when it's one person or maybe one or two people doing them, if they didn't make them, they wouldn't exist. You know, like they're totally something that's coming out of somebody's brain, and it's a pretty good transfer of like, all right, you know, the comic is my glimpse into your world.
Have you ever had a thing? Have you ever had a thing, a character, a story, or an idea that got sparked in your mind, and then you went, can't do it? Have you ever had that process?
Oh, I'm sure I have. I have.
Yeah. And that's the interesting ones, in my opinion, because it's like, it's the ones where you go, can't do it, where you go, what if the can't do it's got made? That would be interesting. But they're definitely, it's funny because on one level, there seems to be no barrier. For example, I'm not a big fan of, say, like the horror movies are like torture, you know, horror movies. I get why they're made, but to me, they almost seem like they're just all about the torturing of a person. And when I watch them, if they have a really good mood and everything, and when they get to that part where they just make somebody's life just really, really bad for a very long time, it's or the captured, you know, girl or whatever in the room type of thing. There's good ones. I mean, look at William Wyler's movie where he kidnaps a girl in his basement and the whole thing. Amazing film, but just terrible to watch, right? And that's true with a lot of these kinds of movies. And you always think to yourself, Okay, nobody bats an eye at a movie coming out that is absolutely the most ridiculous amount of just, we're going to just do the worst things to this person, guy, girl, what have you, and put it in the name of art, right? And you kind of go, but I couldn't make that film, even if I knew I'd get an audience. I could make a movie that would be the worst thing you could watch, and it'd probably have an audience, right? And then so you think on one level, you like the fact that they're able to make it. It's like, that's good. I'm glad they're able to make that film. That's cool. But then you think to yourself, why is it allowed in that area and so many other areas get blocked where they are not allowed to go that route? You know, having a person who's having a film that's overtly something else, you know, who knows what that could be. But just the idea of allowing the same kind of freedom on any other thing, in terms of just a mainstream film, but I mean, just allowing the idea of that would be kind of a cool. I'd be curious to see what got created if people weren't blocked all the time, you know? Be interesting. So there'd probably be a lot of junk, and there'd probably be a lot of really great classic things done where you go, wow, that could not exist had it not been for, you know, the freedom to do it, you know? You always got to wade through the crap and then get to something that's pretty good.
It's very true.
Yeah.
But you're right. I do think a lot of people stop themselves for that fear of what the reaction is going to be, and it's a shame. I had somebody say that to me, like people will not put stuff online because they're afraid of a negative comment.
Right. Yeah, and that's the mild version of it, where they just.
It is the mild version, because there is a spectrum of that can get very extreme in reactions, but I'm sure a lot of people have shied away because of that.
And of course, bad reactions can work for you, as I'm sure you know. It's like one of those things where sometimes getting people to respond and go at you can be the best thing that can ever happen. And that's the world I want to live in, where you can get people where people hate something, and then people that think they want to. Then you get some fun going, right? I love that. I think that's great.
I think when it comes to like art, the love and hate are almost the same, because it's a passionate reaction. It's just at the end of my review, I'm going to tell you I didn't like it.
Right. Well, this is one of the things I used to love when I used to talk to friends about movies or whatever, and somebody would tell me, "Oh, well, I don't want to. I know you like the film," and I'd say, "That don't mean anything to me. Tell me how come you hate it. I love that. I am fascinated by why you wouldn't like the film, or I'll know a film that I just for whatever reason do not like, and I'll know somebody that really loves it, and I'll think, yeah, interesting, okay, and I have to sort out kind of what they're seeing that I'm not. But it's that's the fun part is why does it resonate with one personality and another person? I mean, look at the Barbie movie. Oh my goodness, there's an interesting film. My little niece, she's 40 coming up. She's in her 30s. She loved that movie, and I thought it was a fine movie. But it's one of those things where it really targeted her frame of mind in a way that she just loved that movie. And I remember thinking, she's responding to this movie the way I would respond to Hitchcock movies or things that I love, and therefore it is doing exactly the same process, which is delivering a product to somebody who really loves the product. But I couldn't get my head around how come. I just couldn't get there. I was like, it was kind of like all the things that she would just laugh and with glee as she watched it, and I would think, oh, that's cool. That really works for her, I guess.
You mentioned Tarantino. I don't know if you've seen his book, Cinema. I can't remember if it's Purgatory or Cinema Paradiso or something.
I've seen it. I never read it.
But it's critical writing from him, and I love it. I've been doing a little bit more critical writing, and so that crossed my path, and I really enjoyed reading it.
He would be such a good source for that, because I think he one of the things that I think that he does that I really admire above all is his ability to want to get into the thing that nobody would give time to and let it have some time. I've always loved that about him. There's times where I think it works great. Reservoir Dogs opening scene works fantastic. A lot of like in what was the Kurt Russell the Death Car one, whatever that was called. Death Proof. In that one, all the coffee shop scenes didn't work for me because they felt like he was trying to place that in rather than it happened. It felt like, now we're going to stop and do this thing that in Reservoir Dogs, that felt completely motivated because they're getting ready to do the crime and they're at a coffee shop. Done. But here, all of a sudden, we pause to have this moment. And so for me, it's all about where the flow is. And, but he's really good though, I think, at getting sometimes what's the thing people don't think to put in the film. He's so good at grabbing those things and just going, what if we put this in? Yeah, let's do that. That's what's really cool.
one chapter in his critical writing book where he's basically promoting a reviewer. And it was and it's interesting just to see like how broad his film knowledge is, where he's, in order to contextualize it, he has to then talk about different reviewers from different newspapers and sort of their approach. And it's just a fantastic chapter because it's so unlikely, to your point of him putting in that piece that you wouldn't expect. And it's a surprise. I don't know, it's chapter 6 or something. You're just reading mostly movie sort of related reviews. And then it's like, let me pause for a minute and tell you about this one review, this one critic who stands out, and here's why. And it was a really interesting bit of writing and very unexpected. But I have more questions and stuff. So hopefully this is not the last time I pass.
Yeah, I've got questions for you as well. I think it's so cool. And I love the idea of having, I'm so disconnected from the comic book world now. Having a friend that's like not only in it, but freaking knows it. I mean, you know the absolute full chapter that I don't know anything about. My brother would always say to me, are you reading Jim Lee? Or, this kind of thing. It's like, oh yeah, I got to go in and check this out. And he got into Deodato and these guys, and he'd be like, show me this stuff. And I go, yeah, that's pretty cool. But I just wasn't reading it. And so he would say, you gotta see this, you gotta see that. He stays active at everything, that boy. I don't know what's wrong with him, but he's always busy.
Very cool.
I should send you some of his jazz. It's really cool. He does great stuff. This will be fun. We'll keep rolling this along. This is so much fun. I thank you for reaching out. This is really cool.
Hey, my pleasure. And do you mind if the guy who actually introduced me to Leo Derek?
Yes.
Would you mind if I gave him your email? His name is Chris Pitzer. He was a comic publisher. He's retired now.
Totally.
He's a huge fan of
comics.
Are
you kidding? Yeah. Anyone a fan of Derek's a friend of mine. I'll tell you that.
Thank you again for responding.
Thanks, Jim. And thank you so much. You've made my week, I'll tell you. And my brother, when I said to him, I was telling him, this guy contacted me and I was talking about it. And James I can hear him on the phone, just like, whatever. And I said, and he got a copy of In the Heart of Danger. And I hear this on the other side. Whoa.
I was so excited when I found it. It was in a magazine box. And I'm flipping through, a buddy of mine were out at a comic shop I never go to, and I came across it, and it just made my day. I was so excited.
Well, maybe, Jim, maybe you're the reason I made the whole damn book. It's just for you. There you go. That must have been the reason.
Well, this has been fantastic.
One person enjoys it, that would be good enough for me.
The book and meeting you, this is awesome.
I love that. You too. All right, man. I will see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Josh.